I think you can start now. So we start with the first 6 seals. Okay, what I would like to look at this stage is the agreement with the prophetic discourse, met die profetiese rede. So you'll see that there's a distinct agreement between the outline of the book of Revelation and the outline of the prophetic discourse, the prophetische rede. These are very similar. So let's look at the seals in Revelation 6 and the prophetic discourse in Matthew 24. The first seal, we find a man on the white horse. There's a man on the white horse. Interesting about this white man on the white horse is that in Revelation we'll read about another man on a white horse much later in chapter 19 from verse 11. So we find 2 men on white horses. The first one appears right in the beginning, when the first seal is broken, and the other one appears right at the end. The first one, he has a bow in his hand. We read that he is a conqueror, and it seems that this may be a picture of the Antichrist. Okay, that brings peace at first, because he stands against and over and against Jesus Christ, which appears later as the man on the white horse. If this is true, then what Jesus, in the prophetic discourse, Jesus starts with a false Messiah. Various false messiahs. He said there will be false messiahs, chapter 24, verse 5. The second seal refers to war. The man on the red horse refers to war, and Jesus says there will be war. And then in the second seal, there's the second, the third, and the fourth seals, we find famine, death, and pestilence. Famine, death, and pestilence. And Jesus refers to those same things, death, pestilence, and famine, in verse 7. And then under the fifth seal, we find the martyrs. And Jesus also refers in verse 9 to persecution. So we find exactly the same things that Jesus mentions in the first part of the prophetic discourse, we find mentioned under the first seals. The sorrows, Matthew 24, verse 8, we read about sorrows. This will be the beginning of the sorrows. The word used there actually refers to birth pangs. Birth pangs. And that's quite important, because they become more intense as the end approaches. So as the end approaches, it becomes more intense. I believe most of you have never been there when a child was born. Any of you that attended a birth? You, Sabine, you've been there? Anybody else?
With the cow.
You? With the cow, yeah, with the cow, but the cow is more difficult because she can't speak. The cow can't speak. The cow can't say what she's experiencing. Okay. So the birth pangs, when it starts, it's just soft. It's not that intense. And it's some time from each other, birth pangs. But as the moment of birth comes closer and closer, it becomes more intense, closer together. Eventually, beautiful moment happens when the child is born. So Jesus refers exactly in these terms to these events. So what he says is not only that these things will happen. Remember, these things happened throughout history. Throughout history, since his time, there were false messiahs. There were many false messiahs. There were many wars since the beginning of time. Death, pestilence, and famine, as long as we can remember. And persecution, also since the time of Jesus. So these things, they have appeared throughout history, since the time of Jesus especially. So how can those be signs of the times? In what sense can they be signs of the times? They're signs because Jesus are actually saying, like birth pangs, they will become more intense on the world scene as the end comes closer. In the prophetic discourse, it seems that the above may be a general summary of future events. So this may be a general summary of future events. with the detail of particular events, starting with Jesus referring to the prophecy of Daniel. That is, when he refers in chapter 24, verse 15, to the prophecy spoken by the prophet Daniel. That is, which prophecy of Daniel? We've discussed it extensively when we did the book of Daniel. Which prophecy?
Daniel 11.
Yeah, maybe Daniel 11, but what was the prophecy? The abomination of desolation. Yes, it's referred to in chapter 11. It's also referred to in chapter 8, but in both that cases, the reference is at first to the historic situation in the time of Antiochus IV. But in Revelation 9, verse 27, it has only a future fulfillment. So, because what you're saying, those references in chapter 8 and 11 has another fulfillment in the time of the end, all three of these references in Daniel can be taken as referring to future events. We're not sure to which one Jesus refers. But he says that it still lies in the future. Okay. So, the above may be a general summary. So first he just gives a general summary of things that will become more intense as the end comes closer. And then, a certain moment in time, when this happens, Jesus says, now you must be awake. Now you must listen. Now you must be careful. When you see this, you will know that the end is now close, very close. And this is when this happens. When Daniel, the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel, appears on the world scene. And when the great tribulation that follows that, and then after that, Jesus is directly after that, will be that moment when the Son of Man appears on the clouds of heaven. So the same may be the case in the Revelation.
I forgot what the word desolation means.
Desolation, yeah, to leave empty, to break down, or so desolation may be in the stronger sense to destroy, or in a weaker sense that it's not operative. There's the functions and the whole service, the system that's involved there. For example, the priests and the offerings and everything that's concerning the temple has stopped. But often it's translated in the stronger sense as broken down. So what has broken down? The service in the temple has broken down, or maybe even the temple, some aspects of the temple. We don't know. Okay, but I think it refers to the service. So you happy? No problems? So the reason, why do I make use of Matthew, of the prophetic discourse? Why do I discuss the prophetic discourse? What is the reason for this?
Because he refers to Daniel, and Daniel shows some things of Revelation.
Yeah, we'll find many of the things that is mentioned in Daniel again in Revelation. For example, the times and the half time. Remember, we discussed that already. But the main reason is that I believe that Revelation is an interesting book in the sense that there's nothing new in Revelation. Everything in Revelation has been referred to elsewhere. There's so little that's in Revelation that's not mentioned elsewhere. Very little. Maybe the overall structure. But that's it. So the things that's mentioned in Revelation is also referred to in the rest of the Bible. And the only place where we find something very similar is exactly in the prophetic discourse. And remember, it's the same Jesus that said these things that is revealing these things. So we can maybe read Revelation just as a further reworking of the prophetic discourse. You with me, Anita? You happy?
Yeah, I'm thinking about Matthew 24. I've also heard that some of that prophecy already is fulfilled.
Well, that's a multiple prophecy. So when you read St. Luke in chapter 21, it seems that it refers to the event in 70 AD. But if you read Matthew, it seems that it refers to a future event, because he says directly after that, the abomination of desolation, there will be a great revelation. And then he says directly after that, you'll see the Son of Man appearing in the clouds of heaven. That's the end of time when Jesus appears. So Jesus gave one prophecy. It was a multiple prophecy. St. Luke gives us an account of the prophecy, in which the first a fulfillment of the prophecy is acknowledged and accentuated. That's in the time of 70 AD. Remember, Titus came to Jerusalem. He took the temple and he placed a large banner with the image of the Caesar in the temple, which is also an abomination of desolation. And then they broke down the temple. Okay, so that was actually, that prophecy was fulfilled in a certain sense in the time of Titus. But Matthew shows that that same prophecy has a future fulfillment. Okay, we've discussed multiple prophecies previously. Okay, so what is important in Matthew, the event that signifies the final period before the second coming is the prophecy of Daniel, the abomination of desolation. So maybe that's when Jerusalem was taken. When the armies came and you remember, for example, Daniel 11 verse 31, when Antiochus IV brought armies against Jerusalem and he took Jerusalem, and then the abomination of desolation was brought about at the temple. Maybe when we in Revelation we start with the details, when we discuss the various trumpets, the same events are being referred to, and that we'll see when we get there. Let me just ask, have everybody been able to read the book, my book? To the extent that I've asked you, the chapters that I've asked you.
Only chapter 9.
Not chapter 9. And the others, have you been able to read it?
Yeah.
Marie-Louise?
Not chapter 9 and Martin.
But you've gone quite some distance in the book.
Yeah.
And you've been able to understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind
Okay, you Jan?
Yeah, I also read until chapter 8 somewhere, and
Okay. So for tomorrow, try and read till chapter 18. You'll see chapter 11 to 13 is prophecies of Daniel. It should go a little bit faster. You can skip them, but it's nice if you read them because it'll just remind you of those prophecies. So 11 to 13, if you want to, you can read them, but it's not necessary for tomorrow. It's just a recapturing the prophecies of Daniel. So from where you are, from the beginning till chapter 18, and also in the Bible. And then I've asked you to read that article on that blog on the final 7 years, the different views. Who have read that? And, how was it, Sabine? Did you understand it?
Yeah, I understood it, but it was quite complex.
Yeah. So it relates both the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation to the same events. What are they doing?
He also raised his finger.
Oh, yeah, also. And how did they find it? No, it's dark.
But they hear you.
They've just entered the dark age. Okay, so for tomorrow, I want you.
Quick interviews.
Oh, they're back. Okay, how did you find them? How did you find the essay?
Yeah, it was an overview of the last week of the prophecy, right?
That's right.
Year, yeah, the last year.
The last 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the different views and all the different prophecies that's incorporated in that different views. Was it very difficult for you to read it?
Alright. It was kind of repeated from what you did in the lesson.
Yeah, it's very repetitive. Yeah, it's very similar to what I did. But it includes the prophecies of Revelation, which I did not include in the lectures thus far. Okay, at the end of that essay, you'll see there's reference to another essay. The final world empire, the different views. You should read that for tomorrow. Okay, so there's another essay. And the easiest way to find it is to go to the essay, that's the main essay on the block. Go towards the bottom, and there you'll find the click, just click on it. The final world empire, the different views. Click on it and read it. Because tomorrow we'll discuss that. And that, in that case, again, the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation are brought together in one discussion. Okay?
So what is the article called?
Which article? The second one. The final world empire, the different views. Okay, so that's about the 10 toes and the 10 horns, that article. So it'll give you a good overview of both the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation. So let's discuss the man on the white horse. That's where we start. This is right at the beginning, chapter 6. And after the first seal has been broken, this is what appeared. The first seal broken, a man on a white horse appears. This agrees with the false messiahs in the prophetic discourse. We've just seen that. This may refer to the final Antichrist. St. John refers to many antichrists. He says there will be many antichrists. Remember, he says that. Even in his own time, he says there will be antichrists. And there are antichrists. But then he says there will also be the Antichrist. And this is the only place in the Bible where the word Antichrist appears. Do you know that? With a capital letter, as the Antichrist. This is the only reference. So what is important here, although he's referred to it in many other passages, this is where the word is used, that we often use for the Antichrist. But see the distinction between the many antichrists throughout history, many antichrists. Jesus refers to many antichrists, but when it comes to the point, to the final climax, to the final point of intensity, just before the birth, when Jesus comes and arises on the scene, then will arise the final Antichrist. You see how I relate this to the birth pangs that Jesus uses as a basic underlying symbol or structure in the first part of the prophetic discourse. Prophet is a reader. After many let me just say it here. This is an example of the increasing intensity which comes to a climax with the final Antichrist. So the same is true not only regarding the Antichrists, but also the famine, the wars, the persecution, and everything that's been referred to. After many Antichrists and false messiahs, the final Antichrist appears, and he will be the man on the white horse. This is the way I understand it. You don't have to agree, but it makes sense in the context of the prophetic discourse, and if we read Revelation not in isolation. So any view, in my way of thinking, that takes Revelation in isolation and not in reference and in context of the rest of the Bible and all the other prophecies, you'll proceed in a direction that's not going to work. The man on the white horse of Revelation 6 verse 2, that is the Antichrist, can be contrasted with the man on the white horse in Revelation chapters 19. He rides out on a white horse and the armies of heaven follow him in Revelation 9 from verse 11 till 21. Both brings peace. White is a symbol of peace. True peace and false peace. Both appear as conquerors in war. First man on the white horse is described as a conqueror. He has a bow in his hand. He comes as a conqueror. Jesus is also a conqueror. The first man on the white horse, he carries a bow and has a crown on his head. The crown clearly refers to the fact that he's a king. He's a ruler. So he's a conquering king. A conquering king. The man with the capital letter on the white horse, he has a sharp sword that goes from his mouth. There are many crowns on his head because he is the King of Kings. You see the difference? The king, the first one is a conquering king, and the second man on the white horse, he is the King of Kings. The second one is faithful and true. He judges and makes war in righteousness, and his name is the Word of God. He leads the heavenly armies. So there can be no doubt in Revelation that the first man on the white horse and the second man on the white horse are contrasted, and the one is the Christ and the other one is the false Christ. And that's why they're contrasted. This brings us to war, famine, and pestilence. When the second seal is broken, there's a man on a red horse. He receives a great sword. He takes away peace. Takes the peace away from the earth. Sword. Red as well as the sword speaks of war. The color red, color of war. Sword, symbol of war. So if Michael has the sword in his hand, it refers to his attacking the devil. He's fighting a war, a great war in the heavenly spheres. Do you agree, Michal? Perfect. Okay. So the false peace brought about by the Antichrist, in accordance with the first seal, leads to a very great war. So Jesus says there will be many wars, but this war most probably refers to a very great war at the end of times. Then the third seal is broken, and a man on a black horse appears with a pair of balances in his hand. This refers to famine. The people can only afford 1 meal of wheat a day. That's how serious the famine is. 1 meal of wheat a day. The fourth seal is broken. A man on a pale, that's a grey horse, appears, and his name is Death. Through the sword, famine, pestilence, and wild animals, death is brought about on the world scene. As Jesus said in the prophetic discourse, war, famine, and pestilence will increase, and in this end times it will be very seriously affecting the world. It will be a terrible time all over the world. So what this tells us actually is that chaos will increase towards the end. The type of chaos that we are now seeing in the world with IS, the Islamic State, and with the all the other terrorist groups that's involved all over the world, and this chaos that followed the Arab Spring, maybe, if I read this correctly, the situation will just increase. It will become worse and worse and worse and worse towards the second coming. And there will be famine, there will be war, there will be chaos. Order will break down. The events described in Revelation 6 may refer to the final period when these things come to a climax. That is the time of the Antichrist. So, although at first, in the prophetic discourse, it's a general outline of things that will happen. It was always strange to me when the disciples asked Jesus when they sat on the Mount of Olives looking towards the temple, what will be the signs of the times and of your coming? And he started and he gave these general signs, very general. Antichrists, false Christs, wars, famine, pestilence, persecution. It's so general, persecution. But once you understand it refers to birth pangs, then you make sense out of it. It becomes more intense towards the end when he will arrive on the scene. The fifth one is martyrs. The fifth seal is broken. Fifth seal is broken. It refers to the martyrs. They were slain for the word of God and the testimony that they had in accordance with Revelation 6 verse 9. They were given white robes. They had to wait until their number is complete and God has revenged their death. This is very important. This is a theme throughout Revelation, that God will revenge the death of his saints. And the war that God will make against the Antichrist and his armies, and this wrath that he'll throw out in that time, primarily concerns his wrath, his anger, his revenge for the death of his saints. This is the theme. God is a God of revenge. Have you heard that before? You won't think that. Normally we just think God is a God of love. But in Revelation, God is depicted as a God of revenge. This is also what St. Paul says. If you read 2 Thessalonians 1, verse 5 to 7, you'll find exactly the same. God will, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 5 to 7, you will find the same there. God will come in wrath to persecute and to kill and to punish those that kill the Christians. As with the false messiahs, wars, famines, and pestilence, there were martyrs throughout the ages. Under the persecution during the Roman Empire, which is actually referred to in Revelation chapter 1 to 3, and later by the Catholic Church, which killed also millions of Christians, and under the communists, who also killed millions of Christians. There were persecution throughout the ages. But eventually, the persecution comes to a climax during the time of the Great Tribulation, and that's been referred to in chapter 7. In chapter 7 in Revelation, what is depicted is a very large multitude. And Then it's asked, who are they? And it said that they are those that come from the Great Tribulation. Okay, we'll discuss the martyrs later on again. Here's the martyrs in Revelation. Chapter 6, verse 9, we've just discussed it. Then in chapter 7, verse 9 to 17, we read that it's those that came out of the Great Tribulation. The word Great Tribulation occurs only twice in the Bible. The first one is where? Where in Matthew? 21, yeah. 24, 21, yeah. The other one? Yeah. Revelation 7. Also in Revelation 15, we read that those who got the victory over the beast and his image and his mark, we read of them as martyrs. They were killed by the beast. But they were victorious because they did not deny the Lord Jesus, even in those very, very difficult times. Although the beast makes war against the saints and overcomes them, in accordance to Revelation 12:7, they actually overcame him through the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives unto death. Revelation 12, verse 11. So they were willing to die for Jesus. And those that died were uncalculable. What is ontelbare?
Uncountable.
Yeah, not able to calculate the amount. So many were there of these martyrs from all over the world. In Revelation 19, verse 1 and 2, a large multitude to say that God has revenged the blood of the martyrs. We find this large multitude, and they cries out in chapter 19 that God has revenged the blood of the martyrs. So the martyrs in Revelation is a continuous theme. We find them right through the book. They play an important role. They're there in the background all the time. And the beast, the one that kills them, that persecutes them, it's the beast that will be on the scene during that period. This brings us to God's wrath, the last seal. Sixth seal, not the last one, but the sixth one, the last one in that chapter. The sixth seal is broken, and that is God's wrath. There's a great earthquake. The stars fall in heaven, and the heavens depart as a scroll when it is rolled together. What is the problem?
Ja, ik kreeg een hele mooie vertaling van het woord gebroken. Maar I don't know wat gebroken betekent. Dus some words I don't know what it means in Nederlands.
But now, revenge. Wraak.
Ja, wraak, kijk, dat is...
Ja, wraak.
Het is hetzelfde woord, alleen een andere werkwoordvorm.
Ja.
En dat geloof ik.
So he gives a very good translation. He's using the right werkwoord for him.
Ja, absoluut.
Like
But
verb.
sometimes I not. Dus dat weet ik niet wat het betekent. En ze snapt hier niet wat ik bedoelde. Ik zeg, wat betekent gebroken? Ik kreeg de Engelse vertaling terug.
The wrath of God.
Ja, dat weet ik, maar ik...
Wrath. Ja. Goed, so dis die wraak, God se wraak.
Vergelding.
Vergelding, yes, vergelding. Okay. So the sixth seal, after the sixth seal has been broken, we read about God's wrath. Great earthquake, stars will fall on the earth. Jesus also refers to this in the prophetic discourse, in the prophetische rede. We also read this, that this will happen. And in this case, we find that the heavens will depart as a scroll when it is rolled together. In the old times, you had a scroll and you roll it together. And he says this is the image that you should have in mind when you think of the destruction of the heavens. It will be rolled together like a scroll. Okay. So this is also a summary of the book of Revelation, because for a large part the book is about God's wrath. Okay, so we may propose that the outline of Revelation is similar to that found in the prophetic discourse. This is what I propose. At first, we find the general summary of future events in chapter 6. general summary. I think Geert has a very nice idea there. It's like in our times, we'll first have even before the introduction, we have a table of contents in a book. It's a nice idea. I like it so much. So this is actually the table of contents for the book of Revelation. What do you think? Renanda? If you do this, it means I do not agree.
Yes. Yeah, I missed the last couple sentences.
No. Shall we go back? The one on the scrolls, the one that's being folded together like a scroll.
No, yeah, like when you went to the next slide,
Yeah.
I missed it.
Oh, so where we are now.
Yeah.
So what I propose, why do I say I propose? Why don't I say, this is the only way to read the book?
Because it's prophecy and not everything is yet fulfilled.
Yes. It still lies maybe for the last part in future. And we humans, we should recognize it that maybe we're wrong. We should always keep in mind that we're just interpreting the text. We should be humble before the text. Paul Ricoeur told you about him. He's a great French philosopher. He says we should go and sit at the feet of the text in the same way that a disciple sits at the feet of a master. So we must sit at the feet of the text. We must listen to the text. If I can just get one thing through to you guys that is of extreme importance, is that we should listen to the text. I'm not sure whether you understand what I'm saying. We should not immediately think that we understand the text. We should not immediately think that our interpretation of the text is the only right way to read the text. Most of us, when you go to the Bible, we have a preconceived idea. We have a certain lens with which we use to read the Bible. When we go to Genesis, when we go to the prophecies, when we go to most texts in the Bible, when we open the Bible, when I open the Bible, you see I'm not fully blind, but I need this. Then I have this lens. Now let's say, I've told you that already, but let's just recapture. Let's say these glasses are green. Let's say it's green. Okay, so they're green. But now remember, these glasses, how do I get them? I get them through my time from birth. I was brought up in a certain family. My father and mother, they told me certain things about the Bible. I went to school. They teach me. I went to a certain church. They teach me a certain way of reading the Bible. Later on, I've read many other things. Maybe I went to university. I read certain professors about certain things. And eventually, I have this. And it's like that. But now, it's not something that I can remove. It's a lens that fits me so beautiful. It's part of my life. It's a life lens. It's, how can we say it? It's part and parcel of my own existence. I don't even know I have got it. And I'm using it. You see, but let's say my lens is green. So now I read the Bible, and everywhere I find the Bible, it's green. Everything is green. So now I talk to Geert, and I say, Geert, you know, this is a marvelous book. It's green. Geert, he has a red lens, you know. He has been brought up in a different Christian family in America. And they read the Bible slightly different. Okay, and his church told him some other things about the Bible. When he read the prophecies, they told him about the rapture or something whatsoever. And he has a red lens. So then we come and we meet each other at the train station, and we got into a conversation. We recognize we're both Christians. We say, hallelujah, my brother. So glad to meet you here in Holland. Well, not Holland, let's say in Germany. We find each other in Germany. You Dutch, and I come from, let's say, the USA. And we talk and so on, and we sit next to each other. We'll take this long train ride. And then it comes to Revelation, and I say, oh, the book is red. And I say, it's green. And then Gert says, no, wait. You're totally wrong. This book is red. And from there, for the next 1,000 miles,
Vanaf daar, de volgende 1000 kilometer.
what do?
Wat zullen we dan doen?
We're in disagreement. Because he sees it red and I see it green, and I want to convince him that it's green, and he wants to convince me that it's red. And at the end of after 1,000 miles, we were not able to convince each other, so we got off the train and we were quite angry with each other. Maybe not angry, but we sort of said, how on earth does he believe those strange things? Who told him that? So why did it happen? What happened? He has a lens, I have a lens. We interpret the text. And what I'm trying to do in these days is to tell you to try and concentrate to make a difference between the text and our interpretation of the text, our reading of the text. We should try to let the text stand on its own feet, to read the text as it is, as far, I know it's very difficult, but as far as possible, to inquire about the text, to think about the text. Many people, when they come to Revelation, for example, I've discussed the futurist view regarding, for example, chapter 2 till 6. We've seen they take chapter 2 and 3 as the church age. They take the beginning of chapter 4 as the rapture, the sound of the rapture, the trumpet that is sounded. They see it there in the voice of Jesus that says, come up here, come up to heaven. And then they see the church as disappearing into heaven. And then suddenly they say, yes, the 24 elders, they are here now in heaven. That's the church. That's in their minds. This is the way that they see the picture. If you talk to them, they'll always see this picture. And what I try to do in going through the Bible and through these things is to try and just take the text serious. I was brought up in that way. That's the way my father believed I should read the Bible. And it was an amazing experience for me, for the first time, to read the text and to say, but this is not in the text. I'm reading it into the text. So if you read anything in the Bible, any scripture, may it be Genesis 1, 2, 3, or any place in the Bible, remember to take the text serious. Okay, so we may propose that the outline of Revelation is similar to that found in the prophetic discourse. That's the prophetic Zechariah. First, we find a general summary of future events in chapter 6, after each of the first six seals is broken. Okay, then certain important events are described in detail. That's after the seventh seal is broken. So after the seventh seal is broken, then we start with the detail. Renanda, you should ask me. Maybe I can help you.
No, I was thinking the beam is not so sharp, but it could also be because my eyes.
Oh, is the focus not that good?
No.
Can we maybe just change it slightly, Ben? Get a better focus? Get the lens going again?
Yeah, change your lens.
Ja, je lens is too big.
Oh, so is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, het is rood.
It's definitely yellow.
No, pink.
So after the general summary of future events, that's in chapter 6, when we get to the seventh seal, when that's broken, we get a detailed discussion of important events, certain events. It starts with a particular period, moment in future, and it's going to tell us what's going to happen at that time. So the first six seals, we see it as a general summary of end time events. The man on the white horse, referring to the Antichrist, war, some very great wars in that time, famine, pestilence, death, martyrs, and also God's wrath. All these things will happen in end times that we're talking about. But when we want to know the details of what will happen and how it will happen, then we go to the seventh seal, and here we'll find the detailed description of events.